everyone. Welcome to the September 24th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragon. I'll be joined in just a second by my co-host, Craig Mulkowski. This week on the podcast, we're looking ahead to Pennsylvania Derby Day at Parx coming up this Saturday. Got a nice card there, two Grade 1 events, the Pennsylvania Derby and the Cotillion, along with a few other stakes events. We're going to be talking about their Philly Big Five sequence, their late pick five sequence, which is normally a jackpot style bet, which Craig and I are not a fan of, but I did see they announced this week that there will be a mandatory payout on Saturday, so it will function like a normal pick five bet with whatever their carryover is. I have to admit, I didn't look that up, but that will pay out to all winning tickets on Saturday. So we are going to discuss this like it is a normal pick five sequence. It is comprising races 9 through 13 at Parx on Saturday, with the Pennsylvania Derby going off as race 12. And Craig, we're talking a little bit off air prior to starting. Does seem like there are some favorites in this sequence that are going to be pretty formidable.
Yeah, there sure does. I think there's an absolute free square in here that we'll talk about in the second race in the sequence. And for me, it was hard to find too many super interesting ideas. There is a favorite I don't like at all in this sequence. So maybe we can find something, and maybe that carryover can actually help, where it's something that instead of trying to hit it, one time, this is a sequence you could hit for $4 or $5 on a short ticket. So that's the way I'm leaning right now as we speak. While you were talking, I did look up the carryover. It's just north of $155,000. So not too shabby. I would imagine that'll take some of the takeout off of this bet for sure. So yeah, just one of those. I'll be interested to see the scratches and if that changes anything. But yeah, my strategy going in is see if I can hit this multiple times on a pretty small ticket.
And as I said, this sequence starts in race 9. Race 8 is the Greenwood Cup, which Craig and I actually did a video for DRF on their YouTube channel. If you want to check that out, we kind of go in depth on a few contenders. That, though, is not part of the sequence. It starts in race 9 with the Turf Monster, Grade 3, going 5 furlongs. And this sequence is actually bookended by a couple of turf races. And it feels like if you're going to find a price, it might be in these turf races that begin and end the sequence, because the dirt races in the middle, they do look like ones where the favorites are more solidly established. But beginning with the Turf Monster, feels like Caravel is going to go off as the favorite once again. I know we talked about her last race at Woodbine a little bit, Craig, on the podcast, when she got bet down to a crazy price, 1-2, against some males who had established form running speed figures that were right in line with the numbers the Caravel had been running. But they went all in on her last time, and she disappointed a little bit, finishing third in that Grade 1 Highlander up at Woodbine. She's getting back to a distance that she's a little more comfortable with, going to 5 furlongs at Parx. But once again, I don't see her as having any kind of major edge over this field.
No, this is the favorite that I'm definitely against, along with the last race, as we'll get to. But yeah, she doesn't even have the best speed figures in the field. There's a few in here who have better speed figures. They're bigger, older, stronger males. They have more early speed than she does. So this is one I'm not going to use at all personally. If she wins, I don't want any parts of a ticket that would start with her and Jackie's Warrior in the next race. So she's the one I'm going to try to beat for sure.
And I think if you're trying to beat here, at least from my perspective, there were 3 logical options, 2 that were very logical, one that I'm getting a little more creative with. The horse, though, that I would be most inclined to take, and the one that I would lean on a little bit in this pick 5 sequence, is the number 4, Caratari. We'll see what kind of trip all these horses work out, because these 5 furlong turf sprints are generally a speed fest, and breaking out of the gate is extremely important. You want to get that forward position. And I think Caratari, his race 3 back when he faced some of the top turf sprinters out there at Churchill Downs in the turf sprint on Derby weekend, he did not break that well that day, and Julien Leproux just was not that aggressive from the outside post position. He kind of fell into the wrong trip that time, but I thought he got back on track in his last race in the Troy at Saratoga, when Javier Castellano sent him to the front end, and he almost took them all the way on the lead, just run down late by Fast Boat and beating Gear Jockey, who did have some trouble at the start, but Gear Jockey came back and was a nice winner at Kentucky Downs in his very next race. So I think the Caratari's form is well established. The 5 furlongs, just no problem. And Leperoux has ridden him for much of his career, but I like this switch to Louis Saez, who I just think is going to fit this horse down to the ground.
Yeah, I think he's the perfect rider to pick in here. He's my top pick as well. I'm not sure we're going to get the 9-2 morning line. He just feels more like a 7-2 type horse to me, but we'll see. But he's got the best speed figures. I like the turn back to 5. I like, as you said, that show of early speed where he does his best running. But what I also like with him is he's not a horse who has to have the lead. He's won these races before from a tracking position. And that can be important. I don't like the ones that only win on the lead because, as you say, things can be so dicey in these type of races, and so much depends on the start. If you miss it by half a length, you wind up fifth instead of in your customary spot. So he's the one that I went with. I'm going to go ahead and assume one of the other ones that you like is the horse just to his outside and Fire Crow. He's a horse who made his return to turf at Pimlico. I think you actually liked him that day at 9-1, and he got the job done. Ran a really nice speed figure of 118, which I think is the top last race speed figure in here. Did absolutely nothing wrong. Not sure what happened that he hasn't raced since then. He looks like he's been in pretty regular training. He did have a gap between June and August. But whatever happened to him, he's come back. He's had three really nice works. We show him in bold in Timeform US. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be a main contender as well.
Yeah, I agree. He is the other horse that I think you would want to focus on if you're trying to beat Caravel. The layoff a bit of a concern, but if he comes back in top form, he's definitely one to consider. I preferred Karatari, but I wouldn't be against Firecrow. I would definitely use him as a major backup in this race. And the other horse that I want to use it as a backup at a bigger price is the number 7 Belgrano. I know that he's been facing slightly weaker company in many of his recent starts, and he generally is more of that starter allowance type of runner. He doesn't really broken out into graded stakes company that often, but watching his last race at Monmouth, I was really impressed. I mean, he's had a great trip in behind the leaders, but he just exploded once his rider Castillo found a seam for him to come through on the inside. And even though this horse has gone 2 turns successfully, I feel like turf sprinting is where he really shines. He's got a much better turn of foot. He can come from just off the pace. He shows a bit more versatility. So I don't know if he's quite good enough to beat this field, but at a price, he's the one horse that I thought I could get in there because if Caravel takes the kind of money that the morning line suggests that she will, I think that you kind of either have to go with her in this sequence or go against her. And I think we're both of the opinion, kind of go against her, maybe leave her out completely and try to get more of a price in this first leg.
Yeah, I'm definitely leaving her out completely. And a couple more I'll use very lightly, but definitely use more as C-type horses. I would have Belgrano on that list. I would also use Beer Can Man, who's drawn to the inside. He is just a 3-year-old, but he ran his career best off a long layoff last time. He came back with a 114 Timeform US speed figure, which, for any kind of trip, if he breaks well, he's going to be right in the mix at the wire. And also the number 9 Battle Station. He's another one that his speed figures put him right there with the other horses, is going to be more of a price. So if either of those two win, I still want to be alive in this race.
Yeah, I originally was going a little bit more towards Beer Can Man's direction, but the pace projector turned me off that horse a little bit because in California, he's always in the top flight of runners, second or third, stalking the pace. And breaking from the rail, he's shown back in about 9th place in the pace projector. I just worry he's going to get shuffled back a little bit, but he'll be a price in here, so I don't want to be too hard on him. He's definitely a horse that I wouldn't try to talk you off using as a backup. Moving on to the next leg of this sequence, race 10. It is the grade 2 Gallant Bob for the 3-year-olds going 6 furlongs. And Craig, I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time on this one. I doubt anybody's trying to beat Jackie's Warrior in this leg of the sequence. He's drawn perfectly on the outside. As long as he is able to break from the gate cleanly, it's hard to see him losing this race.
Yeah, I don't even know if he'd lose if he broke badly. Like he did a couple races back where he got just a half step slow, got checked a bit in there 3 races back. It's just hard to see anybody in this field challenging him if the real Jackie's Warrior shows up. So for me, he is absolutely a single. If for some reason you don't think he would run his race, I don't know where you'd go because the rest are just so far below him. It would be a total guessing game for me. So he is a single for me, no doubt. I mean, his speed figures last couple times are right in that 130 area. Nobody else here is even capable of a 120 so far in their career. Even 115s are hard to come by. So it's just such a huge gap that it would take just something just something going wrong for him personally. I think personally.
No, I think the real race will be happening between him and Life is Good this weekend, as they're running in different states, but they both are heavy favorites against overmatched fields, with Life is Good running in the Kelso at Belmont. So it's going to be interesting to compare their two performances. Even though they're at different distances, they put on such a show last time in the Allen Jerkins. It's going to be interesting to see if they can come back and back up that effort with the kind of speed figure that they ran last time, because based on that performance, they both could be favorites for their respective Breeders' Cup races. Jackie's Warrior obviously targeting the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and Life is Good reportedly targeting the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come back out of that tough effort last time. But yeah, for as far as this sequence goes, I don't think it's going to really be worth it trying to use any backups. You just use Jackie's Warrior to try to get through this leg, move on, and be clever in other legs of this sequence.
Yeah, just a quick note. It's interesting. I was really hoping that with Jackie's Warrior showing up here, maybe Life is Good would have a change of plans and go in the Vosburg, where he'd be a heavy, heavy favorite, a much more prestigious race than the Kelso. But it looks like their plan is the Dirt Mile, so they want to get him at that distance race. So a little disappointing for me. I was hoping he would stay the sprint route, even though the indications were not that way. But it would have been great to see these two hook up again.
Moving on to race 11, the Grade 1 Cotillion, the first of two Grade 1s on this card at Parx. This one for the 3-year-old fillies, going 1 mile and a 16th. And we do have a scratch out of this race. Bob Baffert, who entered both Medina Spirit in the Pennsylvania Derby and Private Mission in this race, is not sending his horses. So I think in this Cotillion, that really changes the pace complexion, and it basically puts Always Karina in a situation where she's going to be loose on the lead. And I can't say that I've ever loved her as a horse or think that she's going to pan out to be one of the top 3-year-old fillies in this division, but this is the kind of pace advantage that's difficult for me to ignore.
Yeah, it's one where I didn't want to use her at all had Private Mission shown up, as she's shown ahead of her in the pace projector. I've never been a fan either. I think she's won a lot of her races with very easy trips. Her speed figures were just okay. She's still, all 4 of her career races have been between a 109 and a 114, and she's actually regressed a little bit on that scale, on that TimeformUS speed figure scale. But I'd say basically all the races are even. So even with the pace edge, I'm going to use her, but I just don't love her in here. I guess the 1 mile and a 16th distance is going to help her a little bit too, compared to some of the others in here like Clarier and Army Wife. But personally, that's the two I'm going to lean on. I just think that they are better fillies. They've run similar speed figures, but I just have a feeling that when push comes to shove, they're going to be better. I'm also not, I don't know who's going to go with Always Karina, but for a purse like this, we have a lot of horses in here who look overmatched on paper, and you usually get 1 or 2 of those that at least try to go. Maybe not on the NYRA circuit, but we do get that at other places. So it's just hard for me to really single in on a horse that I've thought was overrated all along.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Always Karina in this race. I agree that she's gotten some good trips in the past, but a quote that stuck in my head from Chad Brown is that he thought when she lost the Mother Goose going this distance at Belmont that Flavien Prat, as well as he rides, that he was not aggressive enough with her, and he thought that he let the closers come into the race. And I think that's interesting now that we see this rider switch to John Velasquez, who is known generally as a more aggressive rider. And I would imagine that Chad naming a rider like John Velasquez, who he doesn't use that often, the intention is going to be to just go with this filly, open up a couple lengths on the field, and not let anybody else into the race. And I think that would be the right plan if that is what they're planning to do, because Always Karina, with a speed horse like this that might not be the best horse on paper, you do kind of want to take everybody else out of the race and give yourself a bit of an advantage coming into the stretch and hope that the others just can't close. So I'm going to go for Always Karina in this race. I'm not sure what kind of price she's going to be after the scratch. I would be hoping to get somewhere in the 7-2 to 4-1 range, because she does have something to prove against Grade 1 company, but I do think that the 1 mile and 16th distance is within her range. So I'm going to go for her here. Not that I have anything against Clairiere. I think she is clearly the horse to beat. I thought she ran quite well in the Alabama last time. I had some questions about her overall quality, whether she had really stepped forward since the winter time, but I thought she put in a really good effort because the Alabama was not a race that really played to closers. It was also a day that I thought was tough to negotiate a trip through kickback at Saratoga, and she did that. So I thought she ran a better race than Army Wife last time, even though Army Wife has more tactical speed than she does. I still like Clairiere a bit more in this cotillion. The one other horse that I wanted to make a case for, but I ultimately couldn't quite get there with, was the number 1 Obligatory. She had no chance last time in the test when they didn't go that quickly up front, and she was just always too far back and couldn't launch her typical late rally. I think she deserves another chance going longer because they tried it so early in her career when they went in the Fairground Oaks off that maiden victory, and she just didn't seem like she was quite the horse that she is now. I still, though, with no speed in this race, it's hard to see her working out the right trip. So even though I kind of had a trip note on her coming out of the test and I wanted to bet her back out of this race, I'm not quite sure this is the right spot. So I'm going to side with the speed of Always Karina.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to use her. I mean, maybe I was a little bit harsh on her. And you make a good point about John Velasquez because, we've talked about it many times on the show. I always say when you have a speed horse, use their speed. Don't run 87 pace figures that are coded in blue because you just keep everybody in the race. So maybe Johnny V or give her a better ride in here. If I have to make a top pick, mine's actually going to be Army Wife. I just like the way she's developed. Since she's moved to dirt, she's a horse who has improved her TimeformUS speed figure every single time on the track, all the way from a 79 when she broke her maiden up to a 114 last time. And while she flattened out a little bit last time, I do think the distance here is a bit of an equalizer. I think the 1.25 miles was definitely an advantage for Clairiere that day, and Army Wife is probably more suited to this 1.16 miles.
Moving on to the next Grade 1 at Parx on Saturday. It is the feature, the Pennsylvania Derby, the penultimate leg of this Pick 5 sequence. And Medina Spirit, it's unfortunate he's not going to run here. He'll, I guess, be targeting a race that seems like it's similarly tough in the Awesome Again next week against some older horses in California. But regardless of excuses and why he's not running here, that doesn't really matter in terms of handicapping this race. It does, though, make Hot Rod Charlie just clearly the horse to beat. And I know he has yet to achieve that Grade 1 victory that he'll be going after here, but I mean, he's run so well in his last few races. I mean, unfortunate that he had to be disqualified in the Haskell last time, causing that problem with Midnight Bourbon, but he was the best horse that day, arguably even the best horse in the Belmont Stakes 2 back when he set that fast pace and was run down by Essential Quality. He's just really taken a step forward over the summer, and it's hard to go against him in this race if he shows up and runs his top race.
Yeah, for me, he's going to be another single. I mean, it's tempting to try to latch on and find another one to try to beat him in here, but I just think he's clearly the best horse. Obviously, there's no way he's going to be 5-2. That morning line's a little skewed because of Medina Spirit, but even then, they were probably a little overly high, I would say, maybe more. Should have been in the range of a 7-5 and a 9-5, something like that. But he's probably going to be around the even money 6-5 range, I would bet. But it was just hard for me to find an alternative. I know Midnight Bourbon looked good last time in the Travers, but he just had everything his own way that day. Still couldn't hold off Essential Quality. He's certainly the main contender, I would say, in here, but I just don't see any reason to think he could turn the tables on Hot Rod Charlie. I mean, obviously that incident in the Haskell caused him to go down, caused Hot Rod Charlie to be disqualified. But there's no way the result was changing. I mean, Hot Rod Charlie was clearly better. He was pulling away, albeit slightly. I mean, it's not like he was leaving him in the dust, but it was pretty clear he was the better horse. So I couldn't make a case for that one. The only other one that has similar speed figures is Keep Me in Mind. He's running the 120s a couple times lately, but he's just a horse who can't seem to find the winner's circle. He's 0 for his 3-year-old season. He actually broke his maiden in a stakes race, but that's his lone win in 11 starts. And he just seems to have that running style that it's always going to be tough for him to get wins.
Yeah, I really don't have a whole lot to add to your assessment of the two top choices, Hot Rod Charlie and Midnight Bourbon. As you know, I took my shot with Midnight Bourbon last time in the Travers, and I loved the ride Ricardo Santana gave. I loved the effort that Midnight Bourbon put forth. He was just second best to a better horse in essential quality, and it's hard to see him getting a better setup here. So I can't take him again, especially after earning the best speed figure of his career last time. He's going to take more money. So I'm going to side with Hot Rod Charlie here. I think, as you said, he's going to be a heavy favorite, and he really does deserve to be. He's got tactical speed. He can make any kind of trip, and watching some of his recent workouts on XBTV, it seems like he's trading into this race as good as he's ever been. So I like Hot Rod Charlie here. I do want to discuss a couple of other horses that I think you could possibly get into the mix at bigger prices. One that I don't know how big that price is actually going to turn out to be is the number 3 Speaker's Corner, who is not going to be the 12-1 that he is on the morning line. Even with Medina Spirit in the race, he wouldn't have been that price. He's probably going to be the third choice in here. What do you make of this horse stretching out from 7 furlongs last time? He was visually impressive winning that race, and that was a pretty salty nominators of 1 at Saratoga, but still, it's going from a nominators of 1 allowance up to grade 1.
Yeah, these are the kind of horses over the years, especially late developing like this, that I've learned to avoid. Way more often than not, these kind of jump ups in class just prove to be too much. And in particular, when the speed figure's lacking. I mean, despite the win last time in the visual, he only ran a 113 Timeform US speed figure. It is knocked down a little bit because of a slowish pace that day. But so even if you want to count him as a 116, he's still got a ways to go. He has to do it stepping up in company. He has to do it stretching out in distance. And he's the kind of horse where, yeah, if he was 12-1 or maybe higher, I guess you could take a swing for him. But as you indicate, he's not going to be, especially after the scratch. I'd be surprised if he's half that price. So he's just not one I'm interested in at that kind of lack of value.
The horse that actually interests me the most as a backup in this race, if you're looking for a price, is the number 10, American Revolution, who has won 3 in a row for Todd Pletcher. I know he's done so against New York breds, but he was really impressive winning that Albany last time over a good horse, Bobby Bow, who Bob Baffert shipped in from California. He got the mile and an eighth distance there, and I just love the way he finished off that race. That was a day at Saratoga when it wasn't so easy to close. It seemed like kickback was really detrimental to horses trying to come through, especially on the inside, and he was inside early, swung out at the top of the stretch and just ran by that leader and finished so powerfully through the line. Got a 119 Timeform US speed figure, which does not put him out of the conversation here. And if he takes another step forward, as he has in his last 3 starts, I think it could be right there. I'm not saying I like him to beat Hot Rod Charlie, but if Hot Rod Charlie for some reason doesn't show up, I think it opens up the race to a horse like American Revolution.
Yeah, he's certainly improving. He's taken big jumps in his speed figures every time out. My one problem with his is with the scratch of Medina Spirit, he now moves into that impossible 9 post position. No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't resist. With his running style, it really shouldn't matter. He's a horse he's one up on the lead in the sprint race. He's come from off the pace in a route race. So he's obviously very versatile. I do think he has a shot in here. I'm going to stick to my horse as the single and Hot Rod Charlie, but I wouldn't be floored if this horse won. I mean, he has certainly shown tons of ability, and his replay is worth a watch.
We close out this Philly Big Five sequence with race 13, the Alphabet Soup Handicap, which is restricted to Pennsylvania breds going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf course. And sometimes in these state bred races, you see horses running in them regardless of what surface it's on, as long as they're eligible. And that's the case here, is you've got plenty of horses with superior dirt form that are trying the turf. And in these situations, Craig, I try to sift through and look for the turf races, and a lot of these dirt horses have tried the turf in the past and have showed that they're better on the dirt. So horses like Wait For It and Irish Cork, I'm just not sure that they're going to transfer their superior dirt form to the turf here.
No, I totally agree. I sided with some turf horses in here. I'm definitely going to spread a bit in here, but I'm not taking a shot with any of these shorter priced on the morning line horses that have shown no liking for turf or have never even tried it, which kind of tells you they probably don't like it. I mean, every now and then we get horses that later in their career try a new surface and it works out, but it's usually more of a guessing game, or as you say, in these state bred races, they're just looking for a place to run. So a couple horses I'll start with that I kind of like in here. One is People Law, the 5 horse. He's a horse who's shown plenty of ability on the turf. He's shown a bit back in our pace projector, but I honestly suspect he's going to be up on the front. I think it's a little bit distorted because of the sprint races he's been running in the last couple times. But he's one that's shown some ability. He's run some 110, 114 type TimeformUS speed figures on the turf routing. So he's one I'm going to give a shot. If I have to make a top pick, I'm going to go with the 4, Saratoga Jack. He's another one that's got some really nice back turf races. He's actually won this race before, the Alphabet Soup Handicap. I think it was in 2019. So he definitely has the ability. He's one that kind of goes back and forth between dirt and turf. But to me, he seems to be a better horse on the turf. So that's why I kind of am leaning towards him in this spot. They're both prices, and that's what I'm hoping to catch in this final leg.
Yeah, I think this is a race where you do want to spread a little bit, especially if you've gone thinly through the prior 3 legs. You have the ability to spread a bit more and not spend that much money. Saratoga Jack, who you mentioned last, he was the most difficult call for me. And if he's going to be around his 10-1 morning line, I guess he's a horse that you do want to include. But when he won this race 2 years ago, he was in much better form than he is now. And it just seems like he's been on a downward slide recently. His 2 turf races that he ran at Pimlico and Delaware over the summer, he didn't get great trips in either one. Got rank 3 back and had a poor start and kind of made a middle move 2 back. So maybe those are legitimate excuses for him, but just seems like maybe he's not the horse that he once was. So I'm a little bit skeptical of him. But again, if he's a price, he's a horse that I could use as a backup in this leg. As you said, the dirt horses are the ones that you want to avoid. I'm not using Wait For It. I'm not using Irish Cork. I am not using Someday Jones, all horses with superior dirt form that I don't think are going to be able to translate to turf. The turf horses that I want are the number 1, You Must Chill, who goes out for Jamie Ness. I think a trainer that you always have to use at these races at Parx, and that horse does have good turf form. Papal Law, who you mentioned, Craig, and the 2 outside horses, Missing the Big Dog and the number 11, Visky Jones. Visky Jones doesn't have any recent turf races, but if you crawl back through his PPs to about a year or so ago, he was running some nice races on the turf, and I think getting back to that surface, he can be a player here, because it seems like very recently he's taken a big step forward racing on the synthetic at Presque Isle. And I know that his turf speed figures going way back when are lower, but just seems like now as an 8-year-old, he's in the best form of his career. So I think now is the time to switch back to the surface that might be his preferred surface. And as for Missing the Big Dog, I mean, he's just got plenty of turf races that put him right in the mix. So I think he makes a lot of sense in here. So I would spread in this race, primarily using the 1, 5, 10, and 11 with perhaps the 4 as a slight backup.
Yeah, we're on the same page. The 1 was the other horse I was going to mention, the outside horses I'm going to use. So I don't think we differ at all in this race. I'm spreading. I want no parts of the dirt horses that are going to get bet. And, if they beat me, they beat me. But I do think there's some value. I am curious how you think the way to attack this race is. Normally, I wouldn't play a sequence like this. But with the carryover, a lot of times people are going to spread just trying to hit it, and that's why I'm trying to hit it on a short ticket, even though it's going to be kind of on the chalky side if I do. If you hit it multiple times, I think that's the way to go. It's kind of different value than we get in a normal pick 5.
Yeah, I did actually sketch out a ticket, so I'll just kind of read it off for those that are interested. In race 9, the first leg, the Turf Monster, I would use the 4 Caratari as the A and Fire Crow and Belgrano as my 2 Bs, and I would leave out Caravel. If she wins this race, then I don't need to hit this sequence because it's just going to be a little bit too chalky for my liking. Moving on, I'm singling Jackie's Warrior in race 10, the Gallant Bob. In race 11, I would use both Clairiere and Always Karina in equal strength. I do think Clariere is the most likely winner, but always Karina. I like her pace advantage. And I would use Army Wife and even Obligatory as C types backups on my smaller tickets. But I would send most of my play through Clariere and always Karina. Hot Rod Charlie would be my only A in the Pennsylvania Derby. I would use that long shot I like, the number 10 American Revolution, as a B, and Midnight Bourbon as a C. I'm not as convinced as of Speaker's Corner as some other people seem to be, and I know, Craig, you feel the same way, and I think he's going to get bet down quite a bit, so I would leave out Speaker's Corner. And then in race 13, I think I already gave out the horses that I'm using here, the 1, 5, 10, and 11, with the 4 probably as a C.
Well, I have not used the ticket maker yet to come up with a ticket, but I will promise our listeners that I will do that, and I will post it on Twitter. I'm sure the people listening know my Twitter handle by now, so I'm not going to waste much time on that. But yeah, I've got to get in there and dig around and use that thing as somebody who's looking to get into to play in these big pick 5. So I will post my ticket sometime before the card on Saturday.
Yeah, just if you're going in there, DRF Bet's ticket maker doesn't have the Philly Big 5 as an option. I'll have to talk to them about that to see if they can add it. I know it's a relatively new wager, so maybe they just haven't gotten it in there yet. So I did kind of have to do the math for this one a little bit. But normally, if you go in ticket maker, any kind of pick 4, pick 5, pick 6 sequence that's offered at any of tracks, you can put it in there and either play it through DRF Bets or just see how much the ticket would cost. It'll calculate it all for you. So that's usually what I like to do when I'm putting these wagers together. So hopefully we gave out some good opinions for this sequence at Parx on Saturday. I know we had some luck when we did this for Churchill Downs last week, so hopefully we are similarly lucky moving on to Parx on Saturday. And we'll, of course, recap all of these races when we do the TimeformUS Pacecast next week, as there'll be some nice races at Parx. Obviously, life is good racing at Belmont, so we'll talk about all of that on next week's Pacecast. Remember that you can always listen to us on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Thanks for tuning in this week, and catch the TimeformUS Pacecast coming up next Tuesday.